We've done the National League North, so now it's time to head south of the border and see how the southern stadiums compare. Here are the National League South grounds. Twerton Park, Bath City. This is the biggest ground in the league capacity-wise, and it gets that capacity through a wide array of different stands, including an uncovered terrace or two. It does have a bit of a ramshackle look to it overall, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I believe there have been plans to extensively renovate the stadium, however. Oddly enough, the ground is also home to Bristol City's women's side. Bristol is a completely different city in a different county, in case you weren't aware. Cressing Road, Braintree Town. I don't know why they named the town Braintree, but if I had to guess, I'd say it's home to the tree that dropped the apple on Isaac Newton's head, which gave him the idea to invent the hard hat, an invention we still use today actually. That's why it's so famous. The stadium for the most part is nothing out of the ordinary, but there is one thing that sets it apart a little bit, that is the blue and orange colour scheme. It's rather nice, but might not be everyone's cup of tea. Melbourne Stadium, Chelmsford City. I don't care if the people of Chelmsford say Melbourne. It's Melbourne. M-E-L, Mel, B-O-U-R-N-E, Bun. If you're gonna name your stadium after this glorious city, at least get it right. It's not named after Melbourne. Like the National League North, this league has just one stadium that features a running track. Thankfully, it's just not that common in England. It certainly makes for a much less intimate atmosphere than you get at football-specific grounds. But other than that, it seems like a solid venue, and you can always sit in this stand if you want to get closer. Theobald's Lane, Cheshunt. I think this might be the most rudimentary ground in this league, and that is saying something. But credit where credit's due, in recent years they brought in the scaffolds and the big cranes, and improved upon the stadium. It is actually looking like a well-rounded and kind of prim and proper stadium nowadays. I feel like that white fence might be the reason for that. Cleans it up a bit. Harden Hewish Park, Chippenham Town. This ground is, well, where is it? It's supposed to be here. I guess it's just tucked away behind those trees. But yeah, once inside you'll see a wide variety of different stands, some of which are looking a little worse for wear, and most of the roofs have pillars obstructing the spectator's view. However, the setting itself makes up for that. Thames Road, Concord Rangers. What the heck is going on here? I think it's some sort of holiday park, but it looks like something out of Xinjiang. Although I don't think the people staying in these homes were forced here for the crime of growing a beard. As the name suggests, Thames Road is situated on Thames Road. And Thames Road is situated on the banks of the River Thames, near the mouth of the River Thames. I think the laid-back vibe of a holiday park is being carried over into the stadium itself. Perhaps it's just those blue walls. Princes Park, Dartford. Having opened in the mid-2000s, you might be a little perplexed as to why the roof looks like it's in a state of decay. It's not actually. It is in fact a living roof, meaning there's stuff growing up there. All above board, nothing illegal. The roof is also held up by timber beams, so it's a very eco-friendly stadium. And a neighbour-friendly stadium, because the pitch is slightly sunken into the ground to minimise noise pollution. It seems a lot more intimate than the other grounds we've seen so far. Perhaps it's simply because it's fully enclosed. Yeah, this has got to be one of the more interesting modern non-league grounds. Crabble Athletic Ground, Dover Athletic. Dover, of course, is known for one particular geographical feature, these white cliffs. And although they pale in comparison, there are actually some pseudo-cliffs here, due to the stadium being basically carved into the side of a hill, so it's a pretty spectacular location. As for the stadium itself, well, it's not the most technologically advanced obviously, but this unique, partially wooden stand is absolutely remarkable. Oh, and in case you hadn't noticed already, there's a prodigious slope to this ground, but that's understandable. Champion Hill, Dulwich Hamlet. Just a few years back, the club was temporarily forced out of the stadium by the owner. I guess they didn't pay their rent. I'm sure they're glad to be back because it's a pretty cool stadium. The main stand, which is basically the only proper stand at the stadium, has a very interesting and unusual design. You don't usually see so many stone blocks on display. I really like it. Surprisingly, this ground holds the record for the largest attendance outside of the Football League. A little over 16,000 back in 1931. Adjusted for inflation, that's a whopping attendance of 190,000 people in today's figures. Priory Lane, Eastbourne United. Or is it Eastbourne? When this ground opened in the late 80s, it was just a humble sports field with only the most basic of amenities. Something you're likely to see in any neighbourhood. However, in just a few decades, it's grown rapidly to become a humble sports field that you're likely to see in every other neighbourhood. Now, it's actually a proper stadium now, with a stand on all four sides, which is something that not every ground in this league can boast. It's still basic though. Stonebridge Road, Ebbsfleet United. This beautiful old ground has a great mix of charming, characterful old stands and unique modern stands. Well, just this one, which was built from scratch a few years back, after an old stand was demolished. In contrast to the new, well-equipped stand to the west, over on the northern side of the ground there is an uncovered terrace. No prizes for guessing where the away supporters are located. Why do they even bother segregating fans in the 6th tier? Is anyone really going to throw hands for Ebbsfleet United? Cherrywood Road, Farnborough. Fittingly, Cherrywood Road has seats of blue, the colour of cherry, and roofs made of steel, which of course is made from wood, hence cherry wood. But in all seriousness, it did used to have a red colour scheme back in the day, owing to it being the former home of another club that wore red. Once more, this ground has plenty of unusual design features. However, it does all come together nicely to form a pretty well-rounded stadium. Westley Park, Havant and Waterlooville. When Waterlooville FC moved into Westley Park in the late 90s and merged with Havant Town, nobody gave them a chance to become football juggernauts. As of 2023, that was the correct assumption, but you never know. The small main stand is the only section of seating at the ground. It has some vibrant blue and yellow seats to be specific. The rest of the field is surrounded by simple terracing. Shed terracing as I like to call it, as of a few seconds ago. It was a bit of an interesting choice to put this floodlight tower in front of the seats. Kinda ironic given that floodlights are there to help people see. Vauxhall Road, Hemel Hempstead Town. Much like how some countries put former dictators on their currency, the people of Hemel Hempstead have decided to put Henry VIII on their crest. I mean, he didn't kill anywhere near the amount of people as Stalin or Hitler, of course. But I mean, you didn't have to do all that beheading, mate. I don't care if they called you fat. Anyway, there is one very small, insignificant thing that I like about this ground. And that is just the way the lawn sort of forms a bit of a lip at the edge of the field. Bullpit Lane, Hungerford Town. This is a pretty straightforward ground, but there is one peculiar aspect that's worth noting. And that is that they actually brought over this stand from the nearby Faraday Road ground. I can see why they wanted it. It puts the others to shame. Another slightly odd thing about the ground is this big, radio or cell tower over here. You'd think it would blend in because there are already light towers, but no, it sticks out like a sore thumb. But it's no big deal. Beverley Stadium, Hampton and Richmond Borough. I keep saying it, but this ground has a very eclectic bunch of stands lining its perimeter. These ones don't really gel together. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me if most of them were purchased off of Gumtree, or whatever the UK equivalent is. What? Next you'll be telling me that Deliveroo is British. What? Next you'll be telling me that the word crikey is British. Huh? Well, at least we have Tim Tams and Vegemite that are completely unique and original creations with no pre-existing British counterparts. I do like this ground though. Court Place Farm, Oxford City. Oxford is known for its prestigious university, of course, and I feel that this ground is not exactly the embodiment of Oxford's reputation. Yes, Oxford has some old buildings, but most of the stands at this ground look like old sheds and they just don't have the same appeal. To be fair, they built this new stand over in the corner a few years back, and although simple, it seems to be the best stand at the ground. Arbour Park, Slough Town. Slough. That name rings a bell. Wasn't there a TV show set here a few years back? One that documented the mundane daily lives of some of the locals? I recall an episode where somebody put their colleague's stapler in some jelly. Oh, of course. Love that show. Anyway, Arbour Park has one of the smallest capacities in the league, but it's not even close to being the worst ground. It opened just 6 or 7 years ago and features some very distinctive modern architecture. I'm loving the exterior of the main stand in particular. Ironically, Arbour Park has very few trees surrounding it, which is actually a rarity in this league. Clarence Park, St Albans City. Just like we saw in the National League North video with the Walks, the stadium is located within a park that shares its name, Clarence Park. I wouldn't say this ground is quite as picturesque as the Walks. The main stand does have a bit of an odd look to it, but it's still a nice ground overall. Interestingly, back in the 90s, the club was denied promotion due to a diseased oak tree within the premises that was deemed to be a danger to spectators. I guess they didn't have the heart to cut it down? That seems odd. Wordsworth Drive, Taunton Town. That's quite a poetic name, Taunton Town, which is fitting considering that they play at Wordsworth Drive, because of William Wordsworth, the famous Victorian-era rapper. You've probably heard this hit song of his. All dem shillings in my pocket bought me a 6-horsepower cart. You can't stop it, goes like a rocket. I got it tailor-made cause they don't even stock it, off the docket. I would say that slaps hard, but actually it was quite Like many of the grounds we've seen, this has undergone some improvements in recent years. But we're talking about a new lick of paint on some of the older stands matching the Taunton Town kit, rather than a multi-million pound overhaul. Still, it's looking pretty good. Longmead Stadium, Tonbridge Angels. After being evicted from their old ground in the late 70s to make way for a shopping centre, the Angels were offered this ground as compensation, or at least the land and money to build a stadium. It has a slightly different style of architecture. The roofs of each of the 3 stands in particular are quite distinctive. I like them. What's better is that every stand, as well as the additional features such as the fencing and whatnot, matches one another. It also seems to be in a nice leafy area surrounded by trees, so it's got a lot going for it. Parkview Road, Welling United. This ground long predates the club, which was formed in the 60s. In fact, it was bombed by the Germans in World War II, and then by the Welsh in World War III. Whoops, I've said too much.
Don't let them know our plans.
Yeah, sorry mate. Oddly enough, the most distinctive design feature here is probably this striking red fence that lines the terracing. A completely irrelevant feature, it's just a bloody fence, but it certainly catches your eye. Bob Lucas Stadium, Weymouth. The stadium was originally built to host both greyhound and speedway racing back in the day. However, in the mid-80s it was completely rebuilt. The race cars were stripped for parts, and the greyhounds were sent to some sort of festival in China. Sounds jolly. This stand, elevated above the field, has a peculiar name. The Balti House. I hope that's referring to there being some chicken Balti pies available within. Because even though British cuisine cops some flack, that is some fine food stuff right there. Woodside Road, Worthing. As you can see, this place does have an artificial turf field, which obviously isn't ideal. I usually prefer natural grass, of course, but I do love that red trim. Very striking indeed. I suppose it's a bit like the fence we saw at Parkview Road in that respect. Most of the seating is coming from the elevated brick stand over on the south side of the ground. That seems like the place to be. Actually, that is the only seating in the house, come to think of it. So there you have it. As always, I'll try to pick a favourite. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. And as always, thanks for watching. Have a good one.